But I want to share a few highlights from a video I saw. When did I see it? Yesterday. It had a real impact on me. It's called, and I want to say this, his name is Karl Falken. Karl Falken, Falken. You can look him up on YouTube. And the name of the video says The Craziest Near-Death Experience. It's actually 2 hours long. I didn't even complete all of it. And I want to share some of the takeaways from what the Lord revealed to him. Now, when I hear people have a near-death experience or a vision or prophetic experience, I always instantly ask myself, does the Bible support that? Does Scripture support what they're saying? And we should all do that. When we hear a vision or a dream, it should be supported by Scripture. Everybody understand that? Don't just believe everybody that says they have a dream or an experience. But I heard him say many, many, many things that are backed up by the Bible. And he also said things that I've heard from other prophets. But I'll just share a little bit about this. Here's some takeaways. Karl Falken, he was a churchgoer. He's a tither. He read the Bible and prayed. But there were sins in his life that he hadn't dealt with. He didn't say what they were. He had an experience where he died actually from pneumonia. He's out of his body. He doesn't know immediately. And I've heard this before. Sometimes people don't know they're dead right away. And then he realized, oh, I'm out of my body. Then, I can't tell the whole thing, but a couple of very evil spirits appeared to him. And they said, we're coming to take you to hell. And he said they were able to project visions onto him that he could see. I saw into hell, and I saw the torments. And he described it. You'll have to hear it yourself, but it was very, very with just what Bill Weiss experienced. He said the torment was beyond description, and the screams, and he said it was terrifying. So I told him, well, I'm a Christian and all that. And he said they just laughed at me because they knew there was sin in my life I hadn't dealt with. And anyway, I can't tell you the whole thing. He called on the name of the Lord. He called on the name of the Lord, and the Lord intercepted it. It kept him from going. But then he has an encounter. And by the way, he said, I knew this. He said, I knew that those two, he said they were filled with so much hatred. It was this no hatred you've ever felt from the. And he said they couldn't wait to get me to hell and tear me to pieces. He said, I saw people being torn apart in hell, and then their limbs would come back. They'd be torn apart over and over. They'd rip your arms off and smash your head, and your head would come back and your arm would come back. Then they'd do it again. He said, and they they got like ecstasy out of torturing lost humans. And he said, anyway, the Lord intervened, and the Lord told him that if I had let you die right now, you would have gone to hell. And he said, anyway, he had, and I don't understand all that. Maybe he wasn't all the way gone or whatever, but he was out of his body. And so he repented. And the Lord said, even now, if you repented now and I let you go to heaven, he said you would live on the lowest level of heaven because of the condition of your soul. And by the way, I heard D.G.S. Denicutten, who'd been to heaven many, many times, he said the vast majority of all Christians end up on the lowest level of heaven because they waste their life. They don't love God with all their heart, soul, mind, and strength. Anyway, and he said, if I were to let you into heaven now, you'd live on the lowest level and all of your children would go to hell. But he said, if you go back, you have a chance to grow in me. And so that when you come back to heaven, you could live at a higher level. He said, if you go back, he said, I can't guarantee that your children will be saved, but if you go back and pray for them and influence them, they can have a chance to be saved. Isn't that amazing? And then he said something that was shocking to me. Well, this part wasn't shocking. He said the Lord was very, very disappointed with most of the church. And then what he said is something Terry Bennett told me last year. Terry, but we talk on the phone pretty regularly and text and back and forth. And he's had an encounter where Terry was caught up to heaven. And what Terry told me is exactly what this man said. Terry said, the Lord said, in every generation, I've given the church all the grace they need to fulfill the Great Commission, and we could have wrapped this thing up and I could come back to earth. He said, but they don't do it. He said, and he was in this encounter with Terry, the Lord was saying, I want to finish it up now. I'm looking for vessels that will yield to me so I can move and bring in the end time harvest. Terry told me that. And he said, the Lord told him the same thing. He said, the Lord said, in every generation, I've given the church everything they need to do to get the Great Commission fulfilled, but they don't do it. I don't know about you, but that's just heartbreaking to me. Does anybody else feel the same way? Do you believe that's the Lord? I just, and then he said, now this is what shocked me. Before I tell you this, I think I talked with Christine Chang about this. I had heard Bob Jones say this years ago. We had a death experience, and he saw people going into heaven, and he also saw people going to hell. When he came out of that experience, he said about 3 out of every 100 or less of people that died went to heaven. 97% were going to hell. And I remember thinking, wow, and I know Bob was a prophet. I just thought, here's what I honestly thought to rationalize that. I thought, that must have been a bad day. It can't be like that all the time. Maybe a plane load of people that were all heathens crashed that day. That's why he saw a lot of people. It can't be like that all the time. That's what I thought. That's just 3%. But he said, the Lord said, out of all those that, here's what he said. On the earth right now, about 2.5% of the people are going to heaven. That's exactly what Bob said. He said 3% or less. So didn't he say 3% or less? Do you remember that? Yeah. And I was like, wow. And then he said, and after I had this experience, he said, I shared it with Kevin Zadai. And Kevin told me the Lord showed him the same exact number. And then he said, I met Howard Pittman, who had an experience, and he wrote the book Placebo about the lukewarm church, and the Lord showed him the same exact number. 2.5% of people are making 97.5% of everybody you see is going to hell. And it doesn't have to be that way. And then he said, no, I did the math, and I did it too. I got on the computer, I looked up on the internet, and I got my computer. Now this number is grossly exaggerated, but if you go on Google and say, how many Christians are there in the world? It'll say 2.4 billion. That's more than 0.25%. That's just not true. But that includes everyone that thinks they're a Christian. And just like I was before I got saved, I went to Catholic Church, and if you asked me, I would have sincerely told you, oh yes, I'm a Christian, but I didn't know what I was talking about, and I was lost. So he did the math based on 2.5% being saved. He said, when you take I'm not talking about everybody here, all the professing Christians in the world, about 8 out of 100 are really saved. It's horrible. But also Bob Jones was promised, and I want everybody to hear this video. There's a lot of things in there you need to hear. Because at church, we need the fear of God. We need to get with it. And what else is I going to say? Oh, the Lord promised Bob Jones and other prophets that I know have had similar encounters, encouragement. The Lord said to Bob, And same with Howard Pittman when he was in heaven. You can read his book called Placebo. It's online. I think you can download it and read it. But he said, the Lord said in this, before he comes back, he's going to release the greatest move of God the earth has ever seen and bring in 1 billion soul harvest. Now, I did the math on that. That means if there was 1 billion souls coming in it, in addition to those that are saved now, that would change it from 2.5% to 15%. So that would be 1 billion souls right now is about 12.5% of the 8 billion people on the planet. So God said, I'm going to bring a move of God like the world's never seen and bring 1 billion souls to myself. So we'll go from 2.5% being saved up to 15%. Now that's going to happen from the church saying, Lord, from today on, I'm going to sell out. From today on, I'll tell you one thing the Lord dealt with me back in October. I think it was October, the very beginning of November. The Lord kept dealing with me about, you're not fasting. When I tell you to fast, sometimes I do. Other times I'll sort of talk myself out of it. They go, that can't be the Lord wanting me to fast right now because I'm supposed to be going to the gym this week. I got to keep going to the gym. He wants me to take care of my health. He wouldn't want me to fast all the time. I'd rationalize like that. And there were times he'd call me to fast and I would, and other times I would say, I don't think that's the Lord. And the Lord busted me on that. He said, does your body belong to me or to you? He said, did you give your body to me as a living sacrifice like I commanded in Romans 12? He said, if it's mine, he said, then you do what I tell you to do. See, that's normal Christian. I'm ashamed to say it, but I gave up. I said, Lord, I surrender. I'll do whatever you want. If you want me to fast all the time, I'll fast all the time. But I think all of us have to make up our minds and realize this. Life is short. We only have one shot. This is it. We need to pull out all stops and become the house of prayer and evangelize. We need to do that. Here's a scripture. But anyway, I believe it's God's plan that our church play a significant part in the 1 billion soul harvest. I believe that. I know I had a face-to-face encounter with the Lord. I know it's His plan. I want to walk out His plan. Here's scripture to confirm if you doubt that. Here's what Jesus said. Matthew 7, verse 13 and 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction. There are many who go in it. Because narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, there are few who find it. There's the words of Jesus. So we need to pray for our lost and backslidden family members. Because backslidden means on your way to hell. It just means at one time you were going the right way and now you've gotten off the path of life and you're going toward hell. That's what a backslider is. But we need to pray for them. One other thing, please hear this. I'm going to say the name of it, of the video, so you can look it up. If you're taking notes, here's the guy's name. Karl, K-A-R-L, Falcon, F-A-L-K-E-N. It's called The Craziest Near-Death Experience. Please hear the whole thing. Take notes. You can stop from as you hear it and pray. So I would just stop it and I'd say, oh God, help me. I'll tell you what it did for me. It just gave me a renewed resolve to live every hour, every day with every fiber of the energy I have. I've been praying this and Lord, give me more strength so I can get up earlier, so I can pray more, so I can obey, so I can be more. Lord, let every part of my life be absolutely used for your will. And God's going to have a company of people like that, and that's the bride. That's the bride. Here's one other thing he was showing that really impacted me. And I've heard Kevin Zadai say almost the same exact thing. Here's what he said. He said, the Lord showed him history through his eyes. He said in heaven, he took him in the Spirit and showed him. He said, the books that God has written about all of us, Psalm 139, verse 15 and 16, all our days were written in a book before we were born. The Lord showed the destiny He has planned for all of us can only be fulfilled when we make the right choices. So He said each book looked like it had chapter after chapter after. And He said in this chapter, if we make selfish choices, we decide I'm not going to deny myself, I won't take up my cross, God rewrites the next chapter down. He had a level, He had this for us, but because we made a wrong decision, He rewrites it like that. And He said, He saw how people's lives, every decision that we make, He said, I saw the ones that took people up into the high call of God, that took them into everything that God had written about their life. I saw the decisions. He said, every decision that we make in this life should be based on choosing unselfish love. And He said, if we choose unselfish love, we go up, 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 up in the perfect will of God. But every time we withdraw, we measure our commitment, or we say, I'm not going to surrender all the way, or any decision we make that's not unselfish love, He says, is not beneficial for us. Takes us down. So our chapters, God has written out for everybody the high call. But if on chapter 3, we say, nah, I'm not going to be that committed, God rewrites it and puts us down. And He said that's how people go down, 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 down. And they go into the lowest levels of heaven or into hell. And the people that go up, up, up is following in the footsteps of Jesus. And I was pondering this today. I was pondering, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. So I was meditating and pondering that today. And I thought, Lord, what is a cross? A cross, what is Jesus' cross? It's a burden that's not His. It's the burden of somebody else. That's a cross. Isn't that amazing? So He said, if you're going to follow me, pick up the burden of someone else and start following. In other words, He's the example of unselfish, sacrificial love. He said, if you're going to be my disciple, follow in my steps. So that means I have to care about the lost. I have to care about the backslider. I have to bear ye one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. Anyway, so please